Let's now have a look at another cool feature of Postman. Now, all the data that we sent so far is pretty static and it really doesn't change from request to request. And honestly, this isn't really the real world. In the real world, you have a lot of things changing. So let's try to add something more dynamically to this request. Open your tab and type in http bin/uuid. This will generate a random ID, a random string here with every submission. So every time I click the send button, you will notice that the value here changes. And this really happens in a lot of real world scenarios. You have one endpoint, that endpoint is giving some information that you cannot in advance know what that value is. So for example, I have no idea what the value of UUID is because the server is generating it randomly all the time. And I want to pass it to the next request. For example, this post request. How about if we have here a field that is called, let's call it ID, for example. How about getting this value from this request here? How can we manage to get that information? So we see this information here, but how do we manage to get it here? And we're going to take advantage of a very important feature in Postman, and that is the variables. And in order to work with variables, we need to dive in a bit in a code. And for that, we're going to click this test tab, which usually allows us to write tests, but it will allow us to write a piece of code. And the way you want to do it is, after this request has been submitted, this test part will be executed. And we want from the response body to extract this information, save it to a variable, and when we submit the next request, read that variable and send the request to the different endpoint. So let me show you what I mean. Right here on the right, if it's not open, just click here. You will see this snippets panel. These are a couple of very useful code snippets that you can quickly use, and you probably need them in your day-to-day business. And one of the snippets is the set a global variable. And we're going to talk a bit later in the course exactly what kind of variables and what's a global variable and what's an environment variable. But just stick for a moment with me. And I'm going to set here a global variable. And once I click this, this code will be generated for me. And we're going to use this set method. And inside the set method, there is the how do you want to have the variable called? So what's the name of the variable? Let's call this UUID. And we're gonna give here a random name. For example, now it's hard coded, but let's understand a bit how it will work. So we're gonna say here just foo. Okay, that's all. Now, when I send this request, this piece of code will be executed. And now we have a global variable called UUID with a value of foo. I can easily inspect that by going here. You see this I. And now when I click this I will see here the global variable UUID. It has the value foo. We have here a value, it's still hard coded, but it's coming from this, it's being saved in this request, in the UUID request. And we want to use it in the post request. So going back to the post request, to the body, we have here the ID. And in Postman, in the request builder, the way you use variable is by using double curly brackets. And I'm going to open double curly brackets. I'm going to type in the variable name. I'm going to close the curly brackets. And this is actually not valid JSON. I need to put in some quotes here. And now this is valid JSON and is being recognized here. So you see the value for ID is foo, and foo is nowhere to be found in this request, but it's coming from a script in this request. So we managed to pass data from UUID to the post request by using this storage of global variables in Postman. And this is a very important concept because in the day-to-day usage of Postman, you will be passing information and requests from one request to the other in order to build different kind of workflows and to make your applications work. Now, we only managed to save foo here. So how do we get to this UUID, which is changing all the time? And the way we do that is by using another function in Postman. And that function in Postman is called pm.response.json. So pm.response holds the response, and we are calling the JSON method basically on the body. And this is generating from this object here, which is in the JSON format, is generating a JavaScript object. So let's define here a variable. Let's call it response. And response will take the value of this object. So basically it's gonna be one object with one property. And in case we are still not sure about what's happening here, let's take this response and replace foo with response. We don't need any quotes because this is a JavaScript object. This is a JavaScript variable. And because this object only has one property called UUID, we are going to access that property by using a dot and the UUID. So let me submit this request again. Have a look at the global variables, and now this value has changed. It's no longer foo, it matches the exact body. So if you look at the response body and the value that we have here, they are both the same. If I click this again, you will see the value again matches and has changed, which means that after I submit this request, if I go to this request, to the post request, this will use the same value. 6fddfa, 6fddfa, it's still here. And this is how you extract some information from one request and put it in another request. Okay, so let's save everything. And there's one more trick I wanted to show you. We have this post request, and we already went in the UUID in the test tab and written a piece of code. But most of the time in the test tab, you will be writing tests. And I want you to show you a very, very simple test that you can write right now without any previous JavaScript knowledge or any in-depth know-how. And again, we're going to use the snippets panel here. And you can just have a look if you find a snippet where it says status code is 200. And once you found that, click on it, and this code will be generated. And we're going to talk about tests and other sections inside this course, but I just wanted to give you a short taste on what it means to write a simple test and to see it work and to see it fail as well. And this test is basically saying the status code should be 200, and you can see here pm.response to have status 200. It's almost as simple and you can read it. And when this is executed, this test will have a look at the status code, which you can see here, and it will match it against the value that you specified here. And because you said here it should be 200, and the status code is indeed 200, right here in the response part, you will see another tab, and that is called the test results tab. And the test results will show that this test has passed. So we have a response to have status 200. And if you want to make it fail, you can just change the value here. So for example, you will say to have status 404, which now we know it's not the case, but now you will see status code is 200. We can have changed it here, but just that's the name of the test. Status code is 404. Expect this status code 404, but we got 200. And this is how you check that the test actually works. Now, this is a very simple test, but it still gives us a taste on how easy it is to write even a simple test in Postman and how to get everything to work. Now, let's wrap everything up. We have here a GET request, which is just sending some parameters. We haven't added any tests here. And now we have this UID and PostID. Now, you see here that in order of the collection, it's important that we execute the UID request first. So I'm going to move it here. Then we have the post request. And the post request is getting some data from the UID request and then just making a simple test. There's one more thing I wanted to show you. We have these 3 requests, and how about executing them one after the other? And for that, we are going to use the collection runner, because now we have a collection and we have some requests and we have a small workflow here. So the first request doesn't really matter when it's executed and so. But this request needs to happen before this request is executed, but because this is using some information from it. And we can go to the runner. And this is a very simple and easy way on how we can run some collections. Now I'm going to select the HTTP bin collection and it will show me the contents of that collection. And without changing any settings right here, you can just go to run HTTP bin. And with one click, we managed to execute all 3 requests one after the other. And you will see here that the first request was the GET request, and then the UID request, and the POST request even had a test, and it says that the test has passed. If you click on this, you will be able to inspect the request body, and you will see here that a random ID has been generated with this request. So everything that we've done manually is now possible because we have all the requests in one collection. It's possible with a click. And during the course, I will show you how you can take such small steps that you build in Postman and run it with the help of Newman, which is a CLI companion for Postman and allows us to do collection runs, to take this and run it in any continuous integration server.